Good evening, everyone. We'll get started in just a minute. We're admitting people from the waiting room. Good evening. We're going to get started with some preliminaries. We are happy to see so many people on our Zoom call tonight for our candidate forum for school board candidates. We'll also have our endorsement vote for school board candidates at this meeting. So it's terrific to have so many people join us. I want to start out by giving a very big, sincere thank you to all of the folks on our screening committee and to all of you. The screening committee this year is Sue Dyke, Jen Holland, Steve Ingalls, Rob Rivera, Julian Rogers, and Maria Wilkinson. And as our loyal meeting attendees know, we've had a really busy endorsement season this year, much more so than usual. We had the congressional race, the mayoral primary, and then we have our general elections for the mayor, the school board, and the city council. And then we had an additional city council seat that went on the ballot after we already had our city council endorsement meeting. So we're going to include that additional seat in our endorsement meeting coming up this Wednesday. So again, a big thank you to the committee for all their hard work. And thanks to all of you for your interest in electing Democrats in Cleveland Heights. This election is incredibly important for our city and our school district. So we appreciate you all being here. Before we get into the school board and the candidate portion of the meeting, I want to go over a couple of things. October 6th, which is Wednesday, we'll have an endorsement meeting for mayor. The candidates who are advancing to the general election for mayor are Barbara Danforth and Khalil Sarin. We congratulate them and also thank Melody Hart for running in that race. So that vote on endorsements is this Wednesday at 7. And as I mentioned, we also will include in that meeting a vote on an endorsement for the additional city council seat that opened up when Mary Dunbar resigned. So that's for an unexpired term. There are 7 candidates for that seat, 5 of whom are Democrats. And finally, Wednesday, we'll also have a vote on our nominating committee, and that relates to election of officers and trustees for the club. With respect to the ballot in November, I want to remind you all that we have endorsed 2 city council candidates, Tony Kuda and Davita Russell. They are both running for a full term. We also have a social event coming up on October 19th at Boss Dog, and there's been information about that in the emails that our secretary, Al Snodgrass, has sent out recently. So please check that out, and we hope that you'll be able to join us for that. It's an outdoor meeting. We're trying to find some way to have a meeting in person, notwithstanding the continuing COVID restrictions. So one last point. We do have this election coming up in November, and we all really need to work to increase turnout for that election. The turnout for the primary election was quite disappointing. So we encourage all of you to talk it up, make sure your friends and your neighbors and your relatives know about the election and how important it is to our city. And please help our Democratic candidates get elected. As a prelude to the Board of Education candidate portion of our program, we thought it would be timely and valuable to provide an update on Ohio school funding. School funding has been an issue in Ohio for, 40 years. And although it's been declared unconstitutional by our Supreme Court, the state legislature really hasn't fixed it. And furthermore, we've seen in recent years that an expansion of school voucher programs, if anything, has increased the burdens on our public schools and undermined our public schools. And the voucher programs have presented very severe challenges for our school district. So to help us better understand the current state of public school funding, we're going to start out our meeting with a presentation by School Board President Jim Posh. Jim will explain the impact of the recently passed Ohio budget on funding for our schools, including an explanation of what is truly changing. Spoiler alert, not much. But again, we invited Jim because the funding issues facing our school district remain a serious concern, and we all need a better understanding of it. So Jim, thanks for your service on the school board. We're going to turn the floor over to you now.
Thank you, Linda. Are you able to hear me okay?
I can hear you, and I think you should be able to share your screen.
How about that? Are you able to see this?
Yes.
I see a couple thumbs up. Excellent. Well, thank you for letting me present to you this evening. It's great seeing you all. For those that don't, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Jim Posh. This is my 6th year on the school board. I told Linda I'd keep it brief, so I am going to jump right into it. I have 3 topics. I'm probably really just going to focus on really the first 2, and if there's time later on, maybe we could address the third. But I'd like to talk about Ohio's new fair school funding formula and also school finance. Notice how I have the word fair in quotes. You can come to your own conclusion if you think the new legislation that was just passed is fair or not. For the last several years, hundreds of public school officials, including state legislators, have been working on a plan to change the way we fund schools in Ohio. The current way we fund schools in Ohio is terribly broken. The legislation is known as the Fair School Funding Act. The work is bipartisan. Our district and the Heights Coalition of Public Schools have been advocating for it. I've lost count in the number of times our board has traveled to Columbus to fight this fight, but I must thank the hundreds of community members who've been advocating for us. Back in December, the Ohio House finally voted in favor of the legislation. The vote was 84-8, but it never got to the Senate floor. I just want to point out that 84-8 vote with Democrats, Republicans, everybody coming together to try to get this thing passed. Then in July, because of the popularity of this legislation, a compromise version was passed as part of Ohio's two-year budget, and that's starting this school year. Getting this passed is a really big deal for Cleveland Heights University Heights because the legislation allegedly gets rid of the voucher deduct, which last year cost us $15 million. That's an awful lot of money, as I think we could all imagine. So this is what happened. The bill was passed in the 2-year budget bill. It was not passed as its own legislation. It's funded with one-time federal COVID monies. It's not permanent. We don't know what's going to happen after the 2nd year. Keep in mind, Ohio budgets run for 2 years. The interpretation and implementation is being done by the ODE. It is partisan. We've already seen words like the word voucher being replaced with scholarships. And I think you'll see by how it's being interpreted, you can come to conclusions whether it's partisan or not. There's a 6-year phase-in with the biggest impacts in years 5 to 6, but there's no commitment of that. Vouchers are no longer contingents on the state report cards. Don't get me started on the report card. You know our school has been labeled as a failing district. It's not. If any of you follow Adam Dew, you've probably seen the videos from state legislators, Republican and Democratic, that basically say the report card is not accurate. We shouldn't be used for anything. And it's not being used to calculate vouchers anymore. But the legislation that was passed does include a large voucher expansion. They are giving large increases per pupil. And also the biggest concern we have right now is the voucher share comes out of the same pot of money as the public schools. So as as more people use vouchers, there's less money to go around for public schools. And that is a concern of ours that's still not necessarily resolved. So this slide diagrams our state funding for last year. The 2 top green boxes show the 2 types of revenues we get from the state. Then the state deducts money from those revenues as shown in the red box. I think I can show you my screen. I think hopefully you can see my pointer here. Most all of the deduction pays for vouchers where we've been required to show this expense as an expense item in our balance sheet, but essentially last year it left us with around $7 million worth of state funding. So it starts off at basically 22 million and it drives it down to 7. This is what we have from last year. Moving to this year, what has happened is you'll see our state funding is about the same at the 7 million amount. You'll also see our foundation monies, this green box was cut by essentially 15 million. And also the state deduction was cut by around 15 million. So if you just sort of look at a comparison between the last 2 years, this line essentially shows last year's numbers. This year shows this year's numbers. The change was basically the voucher monies, which they took out of the foundation, and they also took it out of the deduction. So these sliding charts here, which are all proportionate, they've basically cut the deduction and cut our foundation. Nobody expected that they were going to cut our foundation like this. This is coming to us as a surprise. We didn't expect them. We knew it was going to get backed off at some point, but we didn't expect it to be cut by 15 million. It's still going to be the same amount that we got last year. But with this new improved formula, we thought we'd be getting something more than we're getting. Some people who've been following this closely have compared it to Shaker's numbers, and I'd like to share those with you. So this is the same comparison, but for Shaker. Again, you see, oh, wrong screen here. You see their foundation, you see their deduction. Their deduction is a lot less because their voucher deduct is 1.6 million. But you'll notice that their foundation deduct is the same as the regular deduction. So what's happened here is Shaker is not being as hurt as much in this budget. They're still getting the same amount of money that they got last year. But you can see they're getting essentially 14 million, where we're only getting 7 million. And we're a much more needier district than actually Shaker. I have a couple other slides here to share regarding just showing you some 6-year trends. This has basically been the trend over the last 5 years. And you'll see in the yellow columns here, the net state funding has just been going lower and lower until it's now gotten to be the same, which if there is a silver lining in this, the fact that it's not going to get any worse because of the new state budget is actually very helpful to us. And this just demonstrates a little bit more of the numbers that it had. So back in fiscal year 17, we were essentially getting a net $12.8 million from the state, and it's down to 7 million currently. I've got some sources. If any of you would like me to share this presentation with you, if you can connect to me through my email on the board, I'd be more than happy to send this to you and you'd be able to get those sources. But these numbers I've shared with you come directly from the state. So when you look at the conclusion here on this, we don't think the fair funding is really fair funding. There's no change in ours. While there's no more voucher deduct, the formula still penalize CHUH equally for past vouchers. Neighboring districts like ours are getting twice as much. The good news is in our financial statements, we'll be able to show accurate revenues, which are going to be much lower, but we'll also be able to get rid of the voucher deduct. And this will impact things like our cost per student. You may recall in the last school levy campaign, there were some outrageous figures shared with the community about our cost per student calculated by the folks that were running that anti-levy campaign. Well, they were using that $15 million deduct as an expense that was being said they were using toward our students. That was money we were never seeing, and certainly was never even being used toward our students. So it's going to be nice because I think we'll be able to see some fairness right now in the numbers that we have to report out to our citizens. And they won't be able to use numbers like that against us. I want to go a little bit into state finance here and how this looks how it looks like, I guess, the big picture wise. When you looked at our gross receipts for the last school year, 93% of them come from local resources, and only 7% come from the state. This is probably the most key slide of all. These are sort of the basic things that you need to know about school finance. Insufficient state funding forces us to do deficit spending. HB 920 keeps revenues flat. For those that don't know what HB 920 is, it's state law that lowers the amount schools get from tax levies if your tax valuation goes up. So our revenue stays flat, even if tax collections rise up because your house has gotten more valuable. Expenses in school districts are always going to rise. There's inflation, there's employee raises, there's COVID. This requires districts to offset costs by either cutting services or asking for a levy. Districts like ours are required to show a balanced budget going out 5 years into the future. And our expense commitments, this is what's sort of challenging, are planned 6 to 9 months before the start of a school year. Some of this is required by Ohio Revised Code. So for example, we've got labor requirements that we can't lay off teachers until a certain point, and then they know that they're going to have a contract for next school year, even though we don't know what our revenues are going to be until months later. Currently, right now, we found out that what our around ballpark revenues were going to be in July this past year, when decisions had to be made in the February-March timeframe about our expenses. I want to show you kind of a summary of a simplified cash analysis going back 4 years. These numbers were essentially pulled from our 5-year forecast, starting with 5 or 4 years ago, fiscal year 2018. If you just sort of work your way down and then over, we start with a cash balance. We have our receipts, those are incoming monies. We have our expenditures, we have our expending cash. Then the next year, that ending cash starts the beginning cash, less receipts, plus receipts, less expenses, and then you get your next set of ending cash. But I wanted to show you this. I'm going to move to some other slides pretty quickly, and I can again share this presentation with you via email. There's a couple things I want to point out here. Over the last 4 years, you'll notice in this green area, our total state receipts have stayed relatively the same, where the voucher deduct has grown and grown and grown. Between the last 4 years and last year, it was 6.6 million in an annual increase, which is more than what our last school levy was. I also want to point out, we've been able to manage our expenses to be less than our revenues for basically 3 out of the 4 last years. I want you to see on our expense line how our expenses have been going down. If you just sort of take out all of the jacked up numbers we get from the state that then get deducted, this line here is our core line. We're basically down to 100 million in spending, where it was 105 million the prior year, and the 100 million factors in COVID. We were actually able to spend less last year than we did the prior year. With this in mind, and knowing that we don't anticipate any more growth in the vouchers, we passed a levy a year ago that we made a promise to the community would last 2 years. It was the second time we put that levy on the ballot, but we lowered the amount because we felt like we had to give it past, and we had to really see what was shaping up when it came to finances. But we're very confident right now that we can now stretch it 5 years. Excuse me, 5 years. We want to stretch it longer if we can. This is assuming that the legislation that we know of that has passed continues and they don't take it back, which could happen. But I think that's a pretty good accomplishment that this board has been able to accomplish. I have this slide in for sort of grins and chuckles. If you want to laugh about this, this is hypothetically, if there was no voucher deduct, we'd be sitting on $62 million worth of additional funds right now, and you would never have to have another school levy. So that is something that always sort of weighs on us. Again, this is hypothetical. It's never going to happen, and it didn't happen, but it's just sort of an analysis that you can't help not do. So when you sort of look at the conclusion, we feel like we've been fiscally accountable, even facing these sort of enormous funding challenges. 2 of the last 4 years, our revenues exceeded expenses. We no longer need to budget for voucher increases in future years. That's good. And we feel like we can stretch this past school levy from 2 to possibly 5 years. So that's what I have to share with you this evening. Linda, you mentioned that you may want to have some questions. I know I'm interested in hearing from the 4 candidates. How did you want to handle this?
I think we'll move on to talking to the candidates, and then if we have time, we can consider taking questions on your presentation later in the program. But just in the interest of giving people an opportunity to hear from the candidates, we'll cover that.
Yeah, now, I'm also happy to attend one of your meetings too, if you think that's appropriate. So,
right. Well, we could also plan to do that at another time. Sure. So just as a reminder, we have 3 school board seats on the ballot. There are 7 candidates, of which there are 4 Democrats who are strong supporters of our public schools. We're happy that all 4 of them are participating in our endorsement process. And those candidates are Mario Clompton-Zeimler, Dan Hines, Malia Lewis, and Jody Serini. Dan, Malia, and Jody are incumbents, while Mario was a first-time candidate for this role. Before we begin the Q&A, I want to review how we will proceed and how our endorsement voting works. We will start with 2-minute opening statements by each candidate, and then we'll have questions for the candidates. We did ask candidates to submit answers to our questionnaires in advance, and those questionnaires were posted so you can see them. We can also have a link dropped in the chat in case you didn't get a chance to review them before the meeting. Questions tonight come from our club members, including screening committee members. In some cases, they build on information in the questionnaires. If any Cleveland Heights Democrat member who is qualified to vote on the endorsements would like to pose a question, please note that in the chat, and we'll try to fit in questions as time permits. Only qualified members can submit questions. To be a qualified member, you must be a registered Democrat, and you must have paid your dues if you're a new member at least 30 days before the meeting. There are some different rules for renewing members. So again, only qualified voting members are allowed to pose questions and of course to vote. After we have our question and answer period, we'll have closing statements 1 minute long by each candidate. And then we will limit the attendance on the Zoom to members only. The screening committee will issue its report, and we will open the floor for discussion among members, again, qualified members who are allowed to vote. And we allotted about 20 minutes for member discussion. Candidates who are members can stay for the discussion, and of course, they're permitted to vote. So once we get to that discussion period, and when we're in the question period, if you would like to If you want to make a comment or you want to propose a question, put your questions in the chat. If you want to make a comment during the discussion period, you could use the raise hand function to let us know that. We would ask that the members keep their comments to about 30 seconds so that we can have as many people have an opportunity to comment as possible. And then once the discussion period is over, we'll conduct the vote. The bylaws provide that it requires a majority vote of at least 60% of the voting members present on the Zoom to get an endorsement. So it's not a majority, it's 60%. Because there are 4 candidates, each voting member can select up to 3 candidates. If fewer than 3 candidates win enough votes for an endorsement on the first ballot, we do one more round of voting, which includes only the candidates who didn't get 60% on the first ballot. And then we're done. So we do no more than 2 ballots. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Then we will start the Q&A. We selected at random for the order, and we'll kind of mix it up as we go along. We do have a timekeeper.
Linda,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just, for the people who've only used a last name with an initial, could you please change your name so we can verify that you are a member, not a member?
Yeah, that's very important. We need to have your full name so we can match it to the member list.
And I have sent messages in the chat. Many of them have not been responded to, so.
Yeah, so we don't have delays later in the proceedings. We would ask you folks who are on the Zoom to please attend to that as we go along here so that we don't have any delays later. Thanks, Sue. So we do have a timekeeper. Steve Engels is our timekeeper. So we need to have Steve up on the screen. And then Steve is going to hold up a sign when there are 30 seconds left and when the time is up so that the candidates will have a heads up on that. Okay, so let's begin. Opening statements. The order is Jody Serini, Molly Lewis, Mario Clapton-Zeimler, and then Dan Hines. So let's begin. Jody, you can start. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Heights Dems, for inviting me to address you this evening. My name is Jody Serini. I've served 2 years as president of the Board of Education and 1 year as vice president. I'm a 27-year resident of University Heights. I'm the only candidate running who has a child currently attending CHUH schools. I have a long history of being active in our schools, serving on district-wide committees such as a kindernet rep, a PTA president, and I led the group that was successful in retaining a public elementary school in University Heights. One of the things I've learned during my time on the board is that as an individual, you have no decision-making authority. To get anything done, you have to work together. And that's why I'm proud of what we've accomplished. Together, this board represents proven leadership in advocacy, student achievement, and fiscal responsibility. We spearheaded statewide advocacy for fair school funding, which ultimately resulted in a better plan being passed in Columbus. We elevated equity to the forefront of decision-making. We're being recognized for district excellence in preschool, AP participation, our graduation rate, and the amount of college scholarships our children are earning. We achieved the first increase in district enrollment in more than a decade. We successfully completed a superintendent search guided by public input, and we've demonstrated fiscal responsibility. We completed the middle school's renovation project on time and under budget, returning $1 million to the district's permanent improvement fund. We refinanced district issue bonds to save our community $18.5 million in property taxes. We negotiated a fair and sustainable labor contract that saves taxpayers $1.5 million annually, which was approved by more than 94% of union members and is vital for the district's long-term financial viability. We've implemented more than $5 million in budget reductions during the last 3.5 years. We have a strong record of achievement while leading our schools during a pandemic. And that's why I ask for your endorsement. Thank you.
Thanks, Jody. Molly?
Good evening. Thank you to the Heights Dems for hosting this event. My name is Malia Lewis. I've been active in CHUH since my 2 college juniors were in preschool. My involvement began with ECHO, which made sure the preschool programs maintained accreditation when they moved from Milliken to Garrity. I was part of PTA and PTA Council. I chaired the Career and Technical Education Working Group. After all this, I ran for and was elected to the school board. I am proud of the work I have done alongside my colleagues Beverly Wright, Jim Posh, Dan Heinz, and Jody Serini. We hired a new superintendent who was the right fit for our district and who recognized that we were already actively working to improve student achievement through increased equity. We were recognized for excellence in preschool, for increased enrollment in AP courses, for increased performance on AP exams. Our graduation rate is now higher than the state average. Our seniors have received increasing scholarship offers 3 years in a row. We spearheaded statewide advocacy for fair school funding. While we did not win that fight completely, we did get a portion of the fair school funding plan into the current state budget. We have elevated equity to the forefront of all decision-making. Our new strategic plan weaves equity into all its facets, from the new vision statement to specific metrics within each goal. We are in the second year of a game-changing Grow Your Own program, which provides grants to non-certified staff to pursue a college teaching certificate. This will help improve the ratio of Black to white teachers in our district at a time when fewer African American college students than ever are pursuing teaching degrees. And it provides opportunity for career growth to some of our most dedicated employees who already work with students in the classroom as aides and paraprofessionals. And yet there's more work to do. Equity is not one and done. It must be at the heart of a continuous improvement cycle in order that our students' performance continues to improve. That is why I am seeking a second term. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Mario, could you go next, please?
My name is Mario Clopton-Zimler, and I'm asking today for your endorsement for me first before anyone else, and then also for your vote. I'm ready on day one to lead the Board of Education into a new era with additional Black qualified representation. My candidacy is about empowering and supporting our students with all the resources and structure they will need to learn, grow, and thrive in our schools and in society. I am the only candidate with the combined 12 years of teaching and school building principal experience that is asking for your endorsement today. There is nothing that the district has set as a goal, or the Board of Education, that can't be improved with the addition of my professional expertise and lived experience. More specifically, equity policy implementation is tough to account for, and despite best intentions from the current board, needs my skill set as a doctoral scholar to set the standard and to hold the superintendent accountable for implementing the education equity policy with fidelity. I've brought communities together and uplifted various social causes and community across the country, working as a community, political, and union organizer, and I will continue my advocacy for fair, equitable union relationships with management and the school board. I value transparency and accountability in government and will continue building bridges and connections across the state, working to fight for fair school funding in Columbus, while also ensuring that we are fiscally transparent, accountable to our residents and students. I care for our students, and as a Black man, have shared many of the lived experience of the 71% population of CHUH schools who identify as Black. I am more than ready today to not just join the work of the Board of Education, but to enhance the board's understanding of how to accomplish our shared goals. And I encourage you to check out my platform and priority issues at www.mario4tigernation.com/platform. I look forward to listening to you and to answering your questions in hopes that at the end of this meeting, you may see it in yourself, not just as members, but as residents of Cleveland Heights and or University Heights, to recognize the need for qualified Black representation, additionally on the Board of Education. A vote for Mario first before anyone else shows Cleveland Heights Dems value Black leadership for our students and for our school district. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dan? And we see you're having some difficulty connecting, so we'll give you a second to work that out. Dan, you're muted. You're still muted. Sue, are you able to unmute? Dan, if you were using headphones or earphones and you took them off, you may need to change your settings and unplug the earbuds from your laptop.
Hey, Dan, you can also call in. There should be information down in the left-hand side. Or if you click the link from your phone, you'll be able to connect from your phone.
And while Dan is attending to that, I see we still have some people on the list who don't have full names listed. So we'll ask you to please put in your full names so we can cross-check with our member list. If we don't have adequate information to confirm that you're qualified to vote, you'll be removed from the meeting when it's time to vote. Dan, you've been admitted. We can't hear you though.
How about now? Okay. Is that good?
Thank you.
Boy, guys, thank you for your generosity with that. It is very nice to see you all.
So I know most of you, but I want to take a minute to introduce myself to those of you who I do not know. For the past 4 years, I've served with Malia Lewis and Jody Serini on your Board of Education. I'm a lifelong resident of Cleveland Heights. My wife and I are both products of our public schools, and my son graduated with Anthony Maddox's daughter this past May. Before being elected to the Board of Education, I served on City Council's Citizens Advisory Committee and Parks and Recreation Committee. I also served on the Board of Directors of the Friends of the Heights Library. As you can see, my roots run deep here. When I introduce myself as a candidate, I like to say that I'm a Heights grad, a Heights dad, a teacher, and a public school advocate. I found my voice as a public school advocate while serving in the leadership of the Chardon Education Association, which is my local. I was its vice president and have been part of the team that has negotiated 5 contracts. Over the past 4 years, I've been able to shift my public school advocacy into a much higher gear. I've testified in front of the Ohio legislature on issues related to high stakes testing and school funding. And I think it is fair to say that I've led our efforts in the fight against vouchers. For those who may not know, Cleveland Heights was the first district in the state to be a plaintiff in the lawsuit challenging the legality of Ohio's voucher program. The lawsuit now has more than 90 districts and will be filed in a few weeks. I'm proud to serve as a member of the lawsuit steering committee. Thank you all for your activism in our club. And again, I am Dan Heinz, and I'm here asking for your endorsement for the Heights Schools Board of Education. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Our first question is starting off on a positive note. We'd like to hear your sales pitch for the school district. What would you highlight as the top attributes of our school district? The order to answer this is Malia, then Mario, then Dan, then Jody. You have 2 minutes. Mario?
I believe you said Malia first.
I
No,
think
I'm sorry, you're right, Malia. Thank you.
Sorry. I was a bit confused as well. My sales pitch for Cleveland Heights University Heights City Schools is a simple one, and it's straight from my heart. My 2 children, who are now juniors in college, went through the district. And when they graduated, they ran off to conquer the universe, full of high expectations and hope. And they were completely not expecting to have to come crawling home to live back under my roof halfway through their freshman year of college. But with the resilience and fortitude that they developed at Heights, they were able to make it work. They benefited tremendously from seeing themselves in their peers and their teachers. They benefited from our outstanding arts programs and our athletics. They benefited from the personal attention they received from their teachers at various points in their education. And they benefited from being held to high expectations, no matter what stupid things they did as teenagers. And for that reason, I can use them as an example of why our district is an amazing place to send your children to school.
Thank you. Mario?
Apologies, I was trying to figure out the charger situation here. Okay. So our attributes for, I guess, our sales pitch. First off, our students. Tiger Nation's greatest assets exist in our students. Our successes are our students' successes. They play the sports, they conquer the learning, they sing the songs, and paint the masterpieces that make our district great. Next, our parent community. Parents in this district really understand that it takes a village to educate all of our children, and their passionate service to enhance the education experience for students by providing financial support through levies or grants or volunteering their time for various bake sales is an example of schools across the country and state. Next, our teachers, our support staff, and building administrators. We have a team of caring and knowledgeable professionals who I'm very proud to call not just my neighbors, but my colleagues in education. Our arts offerings, especially music, theater, and visual arts. Our preschool offerings and programs, career and technical educations are next to none. And my bonus answer are the swim cadets, because no explanation needed.
Thank you, Mario. Dan?
All right. Boy, for Pete's sake. Can you turn that other machine off, please? Okay, thank you guys. Again, I appreciate your generosity. You know, I have had the pleasure of serving as the board's ambassador to the Heights Schools Foundation, which is our alumni association for the past 4 years. And one of the things that I have had the ability to witness is the induction ceremonies for our Distinguished Alumni Hall of Fame. This is the single best marketing that our school district could ever show, because when you watch the Distinguished Alumni Hall of Fame inductions, you see Heights High graduates going out and interacting with the world and genuinely making the world a better place in every field imaginable. We have medical professionals who are on the cutting edge of medicine. We have people in the arts, people in athletics, of course, which tends to get a great deal of attention. But we also have people going out and changing the world as entrepreneurs. It is a fantastic evening. And these are people who are very familiar. These are our neighbors who grew up on the same streets as we did. And I find it to be a very sort of inspirational evening. I remember going to the inductions when I was a student at Heights High myself. And, you know, at the inductions, you often hear the inductees talking about their memories of previous inductees. So I think that is a wonderful way to view the impact of Heights High on the community and on the greater world. Thank you.
Thank you. Jody?
Thank you. I'm going to talk about 5 key areas. This is kind of the sales pitch I give when I talk to families, whether it's at block parties or other young families in University Heights. First of all, it's our talented teachers and staff. Second of all, it's our breadth of course offerings. Third, it's our preschool programs. Fourth, it's our music programs. And fifth, it's our sports and our extracurriculars. First of all, our talented teachers and staff. I have the utmost respect for what our teachers do in the classroom every single day for our kids. And that's one of the reasons I ran for the board 4 years ago. Was I was very frustrated by the narrative that was being put out by people who had never set foot in our public schools, because my experience as a parent was very different from what I was hearing. We were delighted with the education that our child was receiving, and our child has attended Heights schools ever since he started in kindergarten. So that was, you know, my main motivation for running. And as a parent, I still think it's one of our greatest assets. Second of all is our breadth of course offerings. So whether, you know, your child is going to go college, career, both, do, you know, go to college after they start a career. We have 16 AP courses. We have 22 career and technical education programs. I think that our kids have plenty of opportunities to be leaving the school district ready for whatever their next step is in life. And I'm very proud of that. Third is our preschool programs. I am very, very proud that our district has the 5-star rating, and that is at all of our preschool programs, whether it's Garrity, Oxford, or Noble. And our kids, we have proof that the kids who start in our preschool are doing better by the time they're in the 3rd grade. Our music programs are second to none. I think everybody who's ever been to one of our musicals can say it is outstanding. And my son plays in both the orchestra and the band. I'm very proud every time I see one of our performances. And lastly, our sports and extracurriculars. I mean, we have 25 athletic programs, and I'm so proud of our kids. And I love going to the Friday night football games. It's the highlight of the week when we're there. So thank you.
Thanks, Jody. Our next question has to do with support for public schools. In this candidate, as you know, there are 7 candidates for 3 seats, and we appreciate that there are 4 candidates here tonight who are strong supporters of public schools, but we understand that the remaining 3 candidates are not considered to be public school supporters. How have you been approaching your conversations with voters to address the issue of support for public schools? You have 2 minutes. The order on this is first Mario, then Malia, then Dan, and then Jody. Thank you.
I've first been encouraging people to breathe regular and to understand that while we do have people who aren't by their actions considered in supporters of public education, that we have candidates, myself, that are in support of public education beyond just wanting to support levies and a surface level understanding of what it means to be pro-public education. My lived experience, my professional experience has been in public education. It is a value set of mine. I believe in the power of public education to transform lives. And I have been encouraging people to think of this not as an existential crisis, because Black folks have been dealing with Republicans attacking them for the entire time that Republicans have not been for social justice issues. So I'm not surprised that there are people who are interested in destroying another fabric of civil society that are running for another public office. It's about turning out people who value our public schools. The numbers exist out there. If elections are about numbers, let's not uplift the fact that these people exist. Let's work on the messaging, knock on doors, make the phone calls, and get people out that we know exist here that will support our schools. There are more of us who support public schools than there are of them. Are we willing to work for it? Are we willing to put down our own biases and our own feelings of wanting to be right instead of winning to do so? We'll find out on November 2nd. But I, for one, am doing that and have been doing so since February.
Thank you very much. Malia?
Oops, there we go. Although I personally was the product of private education because my parents traveled the world and I was not in the United States for most of my childhood. I'm a very strong proponent of public education, and that was the first choice for where to live and where to send my kids to school. And I believe strongly that public education is part of the common good, whether or not one uses that particular resource. Having it there, having it be strong, having it be vibrant, benefits everybody in the community. 90% of children in the United States attend public school, so it's obviously has much greater reach than any private school could. And when people tell me they don't believe in the public schools, then I remind them that they don't have to believe in public education. They just have to realize that it affects them whether they want it to or not. Just as having a strong public library system benefits us all, whether you buy your books from Amazon or you go get them down on Lee Road, having a strong police force benefits us all. Having a strong public school system benefits us all, whether, from property values to the desirability of living in a neighborhood. The fact that 3 people who are not proponents of public education are running is unfortunate, but it is no surprise given what's been happening around the country. And, our job is to continue repeating that this is the common good, and that's what I stand for.
Thank you. Dan?
Linda, could I ask for you to please repeat the question? I want to make sure that I answer the question.
Sure. The question is that we appreciate that there are 4 candidates here who are strong supporters of public schools, but we understand that the remaining 3 candidates are not considered to be public school supporters. How have you been approaching your conversations with voters to address the issue of support for public schools?
Thank you very much. So regardless of whether or not you're a supporter of public schools, you have a public school board. And the public schools in Cleveland Heights, University Heights have got a generation-long reputation of doing fantastic work. My history with and support of the vouchers lawsuit tells the entire story. I find vouchers to be an attack on public education itself, and I find the 3 folks running on the Republican slate to be a direct assault on public education here in Cleveland Heights. But I think that we also need to talk about the good work that we're doing, and I think that we need to talk up our school district. And we also need to let folks know that we are quite serious about the financial end of things. And that's when we can talk about the fact that due to the renegotiating of our bonds, we've been able to save our taxpayers, not the school district, but our taxpayers, $18.5 million over the next 12 years. That's an entire mill off of people's tax bill that will be seen beginning in January. I also think that we need to talk about what it is we're bringing to the community. This past year in May, the graduating class was around 350 kids, and they were offered about $14 million in scholarships. So the work that's happening in our classrooms with our incredible teachers and with the hard work of our kids and our families behind them is paying dividends. It's clearly paying dividends. And that is what having public school is all about. It's about enriching the community and people's willingness to support that, the community schools in that way. So I think it's really about the conversation in terms of the taxpayers and facing the threat of vouchers head on.
Thank you, Dan. Jody?
Thank you. First of all, the thing that I tend to talk about is the successes of our public schools. And I talk about the importance of public education and how that relates to democracy itself, and why that is such a fabric of what makes our nation great. And how if you don't have an educated electorate, that's kind of why we're in some of the situation that we've been in the last 4 years. I also talk about the importance of our property values and how our public schools contribute to that. I listen very carefully to the constituents who don't have any connection to our public schools. Often when I'm out at a block party or talking to, somebody at an event, they may be somebody who, they didn't use our public schools, or maybe they don't have children yet, or they have young children. And I listen very carefully about what it is they want from the public schools. And often what I hear is they do want strong public schools. So that's a good opening for me to talk about where we've been succeeding. And then I tell them a story about my child, because everybody remembers a story versus just a bunch of facts. And then I'm, also able to pivot to why it's important and why it's in all of our best interest to make sure that our public schools are strong. And what I'm pleased about is I generally get a very good reaction. And then occasionally they will ask me a question about some of the other candidates that are running. And I'm not going to go negative, but what I do is I encourage them to ask questions. I ask, I say, hey, make sure you look into their background, find out what they're involved with, find out, where did they send their kids? Were they pleased with the experience? What things are they involved with? And, I ask them to at the end, support people who want the best for all of our kids in the community, maybe not just a subset. So I'm actually pleased that it's been a good opportunity to discuss more about our public schools. And I think it's been a way for our community to heal in some ways.
Thank you. Our next question has to do with the school funding. What is your evaluation of the effectiveness of the Ohio legislature's latest attempt to address school funding in Ohio? What is your recommendation for how the district can effectively seek a better funding solution? The order on this is Dan, then Malia, then Mario, and then Jody.
Well, I believe that the legislature cut everything but the name in the Fair School Funding Program. It is terrible. They back-ended all of the funding for it for the last biennial budget, which will be 4 years off. They cut our this year's funding, as Jim talked about, based on last year's funding, which included vouchers. So we're at a point right now with this current biennial budget where 25% of the education of Ohio's education dollars, 25% is going into private schools. Those private schools only educate 10% of Ohio's school-age children. So if you believe that 1 dime of public money should be spent educating kids in private schools, which I do not, but even if you do, nobody could think that it is fair or just for 90% of Ohio's school children, the public school children, to be educated with only 75% of the tax dollars. That is fundamentally unjust. It is unjust by design, and it exists because we want to funnel money into private schools that tend to not support the values that are expressed in the public schools. As Jody just talked about, our public schools are where we transmit our greatest gift, our democracy, onto the next generation. I take that very, very seriously. And this is the duty of public schools. This is also an attack on public sector unions. We need to say that out loud because it is true. They want to defund public schools because they want to defund public sector unions. So Linda, the last thing that you asked is, what do? We stay vigilant. The Cleveland Heights University Heights community was fantastic. We showed up in Columbus every time. The state legislature, they joke about it now, that when they're now hearing something that has to do with public schools, they can count on Tiger Nation to be in the House. So we need to continue those efforts. We have to make sure that they fulfill their promises in the Fair School Funding Program in the next biennial budget and the final one. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Malia?
There we go. I don't have much to add to what Dan said, except that, you know, Benjamin Franklin is spinning in his grave. Because there's no question that the State House intends to defund public education and funnel public tax money to private schools. And the system is intended to fund private religious schools in places not Cleveland Heights. We just happen to have a larger concentration of private and parochial schools than most parts of Ohio, which is why we were so disproportionately affected by vouchers. And yes, we need to go back to Columbus week after week after week. It will be particularly important for the next biennial budget and for the third biennial budget that is required to get the funding to actually be implemented properly. A better funding solution. Well, I mean, a better funding solution would be one that is constitutional. And unfortunately, we have a system which is not constitutional. And until we can hold the legislators' feet to the fire and get them to admit that they are not following the laws of the land or the laws of Ohio, we're a little bit up a creek without a paddle. So we have to just keep fighting to try to get what we have now to continue and to get the next step in the fair funding plan implemented, and then the last step, which is the most important one, implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. Mario, Mario, by the way, it was called to my attention that I mispronounced your last name, and I apologize for that. You can go ahead, please.
No, sure, thank you. Two things before I address the question. I need to just say this out loud and be very clear. It's not a secret, but the three incumbents are running as a slate, and I am running also as a Democrat in this race, and that there's a power dynamic that exists in this room that I just need to uplift. One, also as the only Black candidate in this room. So I just want to make that present in the space. And two, if we're talking about political organizing, I am a viable candidate for the Board of Education running up against three incumbents because of my field organizing experience, my political organizing, and I applaud the board's efforts in organizing in Columbus, and I look forward to amplifying and increasing their capacity as a board member. In his article, Embracing Racism Under Its Pervasiveness and Persistence, Gary Williams wrote, "Perhaps no area of schooling underscores inequity and racism better than school funding. Inequality in public funding is at its core a manifestation of a system that perpetuates racism, and by basing school funding on local property taxes, our children, specifically our Black children, are left at a disadvantage." In 2002, Ohio Supreme Court ruled in DeRalph versus State of Ohio that the state school funding model was unconstitutional. However, the state did not provide any real guidance. The 6-year plan that they passed in the budget is only funded for 2 years. With all the caps and reductions put into place by the state, CHUH will receive roughly a third of the funding that they should receive from the state, requiring us local taxpayers to pay the remainder. Vouchers are exempt from any state caps and reductions and receive 100% of their funding, plus an increase in voucher value in this recent budget from $4,650 to $5,500 for K-8 students and $6,000 to $7,500 for high school students. We must continue to be fiscally responsible with our spending, transparent with our accounting, and implement my budget and accountability plan, which is available on my website. We need to work towards a 5-year levy cycle. We need to engage our community's private and public school families to work together to find meaningful solutions and reduce unproductive racist and anti-Semitic rhetoric as it relates to us advocating for public school funding, while also having a Orthodox Jewish population that uses vouchers. It's a nuanced conversation that requires nuanced answers if we're all going to live in a diverse community. So the plans that we have coming up for the budget to be continued, but we have to start doing some work in-house to show our community that we're being fiscally transparent.
Thank you. Jody?
So my evaluation of the effectiveness of the Ohio legislature's latest attempt to address Ohio school funding is that the state has begun to take some very modest steps, but it has yet to fully commit. So the state's current biennial budget has some positive steps forward, such as funding vouchers directly and eliminating the deduction method of funding them. And I believe that this was a win for our community because under the deduction method, our district had a very hard time trying to budget. And I use the analogy of, think about it as if you're trying to manage your household budget, but other people can write checks and spend money and you don't know about it till after the fact. So that was really challenging for us as a school board to be able to manage a budget well. The biennial budget also included some very concerning items that, such as increasing the level of funding for non-public students at a much higher rate than what the state provides for public school students. And that's something that, we need to keep fighting against and try and make sure our voices are heard on that. The most concerning thing for me is that this new fair school funding plan is not fully funded, that it's only the first 2 years. And I think that, if we do nothing else, we absolutely need to work really hard as a community to make sure it's passed and it's passed again, and it's passed again. So, the majority of this funding that helps our district is backloaded in years 5 and 6 of the plan. So I don't care who is on the school board, they need to be fighting for that. That is the #1 issue that will help our community. So I encourage, the 4 candidates that are here, I hope 3 of us are elected, and I hope that whatever 3 it is, that's your #1 goal. Get that fair school funding plan completely implemented.
Thank
For the
you.
record, I do want to be one of those 3.
Our next question has to do with diversity and inclusion. What's your suggestion on how to achieve a more equitable and diverse staff in our schools? You have 2 minutes for this. The order is Malia, then Mario, then Jody, and then Dan. Malia?
Okay, well, first off, we know that there are not as many African-American college students earning teaching degrees as there were a generation ago or 2 generations ago, because African-American college students have many more options than they used to have. And that is a good thing, rather than, only being allowed to work towards, a couple of different professions. But what that does mean is that it is harder and harder to recruit African-American teachers to our district. That's why I am such a huge fan of the Grow Your Own program. This makes me so happy. You have no idea. What we have done is applied for and received a grant which provides scholarships to any of our staff members who want to pursue a college teaching degree, so that they don't incur expenses for tuition or books or supplies. And this is, the best way for us to create new teachers in-house who already work in our buildings with our students and are committed to the community and to our kids. And there are, we're in year 2 of the program. Last year, it was a $35,000 grant, I believe. Don't quote me on the numbers because I'm a little fuzzy. This year, it's a $70,000 grant for the next 2 years. And this will allow those employees who want to pursue their degrees, finish their degrees, and then become licensed teachers in our district. We are also recruiting nationally, not just at John Carroll and CSU, but at HBCUs around the country to try to encourage students in teacher training programs to come and work for us. But as I said, there's a national shortage of teachers. There's an even greater national shortage of African-American teachers. So that's why the Grow Your Own is such a huge deal. Thank you.
Very much. Mario?
So the Board of Education adopted an education equity policy in 2016. That was the first of its kind, I believe, in Ohio. This policy has necessitated the use of an equity lens from which all the district goals can be filtered. Education equity is a key tool in the district's work to improve the educational experience. However, I am concerned that the current board is not doing enough to understand education equity and how to monitor its implementation. I have the career and academic experience as a doctoral scholar in education leadership and education equity needed to fill the gap in understanding that currently exists with the board. In the most recent meeting where there was an equity task force updates, there were 0 questions from the Board of Education asked regarding the education equity policy and the task force update. There was a lot of praise, and there's a lot of praise to be done and to be sent around as it relates to the task force's work. But the board must dig deeper and ask more questions, not just on equity, but on a series of issues. As board members, I will as a board member, I will respect the work of our task forces, especially those task forces that are led by Black women, not only by showering praise and thanks for their hard work, but also engaging in evaluative inquiry and asking deep diving questions to demonstrate my understanding about the work that they are so passionately working on. There definitely needs to be an understanding of what the definition of fidelity is in terms of implementing with fidelity. The district has done module 1 and 2 training for all its staff. That's awesome. 3 and 4 is coming up this year. I'm curious about the board members' module 1 and 2 trainings. If they haven't done so yet, I can put the link in the chat. It's available, it's free. I'm hoping that that's something that's been done already. I do believe that we need to continue encouraging the IB framework or the Universal Design for Learning framework as, sorry, that's my dog, as a part of our equity structure. We need to make sure that there is an equity, some sort of equity monitoring tool that we use to make sure that we are following which policy points are actually being implemented and monitored and progressed over time. Oh, and also we need to redact and readopt the currently plagiarized resolution on supporting honesty in education. I believe this Board of Education has enough knowledge and enough original intellect to be able to create its own honesty in education resolution and not copy and paste it mostly from the State Board of Education resolution.
Thank you. Jody?
Linda, I'm going to ask you to repeat the question, but first I want to respond to the comment that Mario just made about the resolution. First of all, we did adopt the State Board of Education's resolution because that shows the inexperience of him as a candidate. That's how you get things done. You take language and we continue to say the same message, whether it's our district and other districts. That's how you get the attention of people in Columbus, by making sure that you're using the same language and hammering home the same points. So now that I've made that point, Linda, I would like you to please repeat the question so I make sure I understand and I answer it exactly as you are looking for.
Yeah, the question is, what is your suggestion on how to achieve a more equitable and diverse staff in our schools?
Okay, well, that's an interesting question because first of all, you know, we do have union contracts. So one of the things that we need to do is follow those union contracts. So, you know, we have seniority built into some of those contracts. So it's not like we can just change staff on a whim. So that's the first thing. Second of all, we as a board hired a Black superintendent. That's who leads our schools and that's who is involved in hiring decisions. We have trained 620 employees in the district on equity, and our own board did go through training, groundwater training with the Racial Equity Institute when we all first joined the board. And we did that in conjunction with Cleveland Heights and University Heights leaders, as well as the police and the fire department, which I felt was really, really important. Malia talked about the Grow Your Own program. That is another program that I am a very big fan of because those are employees that are already in our district. They know our kids, they know our district, and they want to get their teaching degrees. And it makes a natural bridge for them to grow into our staff. So we don't run into some of those seniority issues where, you know, we have people that they're in those roles and we can't replace them and we don't want to replace them. They're doing a good job. So this is one of those changes that has to happen over time and through some natural attrition in some cases. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Dan?
Thank you. So I think Malia really talked about the Grow Your Own program, which is our sort of institutional work toward this important goal. It is an absolutely critical goal to get a workforce that is much more reflective of the students in our classroom. That's a really important piece. And so the Grow Your Own program, I'm hoping, will really reap some benefits. I had an amazing conversation as I was hanging door knockers the other day with a woman who actually is a success story of the philosophy behind that. Before the Grow Your Own program came into being, she worked in our school district and she wanted to pursue a bigger role in students' lives. And so she came to us with an associate's degree, and she pursued her 4-year degree with a teaching certificate out of her own passion. And it was just fantastic. And it really spoke to the folks who we have already in our buildings who can and want to give more. And the Grow Your Own program is a great opportunity for us to lift them up and help them while they do that. I also think that we need to, thank you for the time, we need to deepen our relationship with more schools of education. Fewer and fewer kids are going into education, thanks to a great extent because of the GOP's systematic attack on teachers. But we need to extend those relationships into more universities. And then also, I think what Mario said was right about needing more benchmarks with our strategic plan. However, there are benchmarks built into the revision of the strategic plan. Thank you.
Dan, we got a follow-up question in the chat that relates to the comment you made earlier about 10% of funding going to private schools and 90% going to public schools. And the question is, where do the charter schools fit in?
So it's actually worse than that. It's 25% of the budget of the education dollars are going to private schools, and those private schools only educate 10% of Ohio's kids. Charter schools, I need to get back to you on that because I don't want to say something that's incorrect. However, it's also worth really pointing out when we're talking about race that Ohio has about 611 public schools. Of those 611 public schools, 90% of vouchers came from 21 school districts. All 21 of those are majority poverty districts, and 20 of those 21 are majority minority districts. So this is a system that is designed to pull the rug out educationally from majority minority schools as well as majority poverty schools.
All right, I think that's enough supplemental on that. We'll have to let you provide some further information on that if you want to afterwards. Tony, did you have a question? I see your hand up, but I don't see a question in the chat from you.
Yeah, I appreciate. I just couldn't type this out because it's a little bit involved. So
well, keep it concise, please.
Yeah, I will. So we all agree that the state report card is awful, but there are some federal dollars coming our way, and it would be nice to move some numbers in the state report card to show, that we're, focused. So my question is, what category should we pick that we, of numbers we could move, reading comprehension, science, whatever? What grade level would be the most effective grade level to look at? And then what enrichment programs could we fund that could actually help us move those numbers?
That's a long question. So if any candidate wants to answer that, we'll let them have a minute to answer that. Thank you.
Sure, I'll start. We're gonna really need to focus on the intersections between the various identities of our students. Targeting special education academic achievement has across the board net increases for academic achievement. In my role as a principal intern right now, we are working on figuring out many different types of programs that we can utilize those ESSER funds to start rebuilding the capacity of our students to get back to the learning capacity that they had prior to virtual learning. We got to increase social emotional support for our students with additional social workers and psychologists with this money. Our students need help, and we can provide time-limited contracts for services based on the amount of ESSER funds that are available. We need to prioritize campus development of reentry and reculture plans, including student orientation, so that there's climate and culture improvement. We need to continue to enhance multi-tiered support structures like PBIS, positive behavior intervention supports, and response to intervention, and guide literacy development in addition to behavior management. But if you can figure out how to if we can figure out how to get our students who qualify for special services back on track again, that yields dividends for whatever measure you want to go by, report card, the actual learning that they do, which ultimately is what matters, et cetera.
Anybody else want to comment on that?
I'm going to give you a really quick, short answer, and that is anything that we can do to expand the fantastic work we do in pre-K. If you want to really change the trajectory of a child's life, give them pre-K education. And then also one of the things that we need to do as a district in-house that we are doing is we need to rethink our early learnings reading programs. And we're doing that.
I have a question now about contract negotiations. Given the last set of contract negotiations with teachers, how would you change the approach for next time? And the order on this one is Jody, then Malia, then Dan, then Mario.
Sorry, I didn't have my unmute off there. Thank you, Linda. First of all, I would like to explore alternative bargaining methods. You know, I acknowledge that both sides can and should improve, and the parties would benefit from a less adversarial style of bargaining in the future. All sides have been trained in the federal mediation and conciliation service over the years, but you know, the parties have to agree if we are going to use an alternative bargaining method. And so I think it's something that we should explore together. And it's something that I know I personally spoke with Karen Rigo, president of 795, the day after the negotiations finished. And I know board member Dan Heinz provided resources and a contact for us at FMCS that specializes in alternative bargaining styles. And we've invited the union leadership to join us in that additional training. Also, I would continue to engage the services of FMCS. They were involved throughout our negotiations, and I thought that they were very helpful. I would also revamp the district's healthcare committee. You know, during the conversation I had with Karen Rigo after the negotiations, we agreed that that committee really needs to take an active role in understanding and explaining to its members, you know, how to be more informed healthcare consumers and the impact that escalating healthcare costs are having on our district, and you know why that led us down the path that we ended up being in. And while it's out of my control, I would highly encourage our union to engage legal counsel or the services of a professional bargainer through the American Federation of Teachers. Yeah, I just feel like it's in their members' best interest when you're negotiating a contract that's worth millions of dollars. I think it's best for the taxpayers. It's best for everyone to have people at the table who are well-versed in public labor law.
Thank you. Malia?
There we go. Sorry, it always takes a while. I would like the district and all four unions to engage in a study project about alternative forms of bargaining. There are you know, several different options that would be appropriate given our structure. The first one that comes to mind is where you just set out a number and say, we're going to negotiate your 6 most important points and our 6 most important points, so that both sides come to the table with a short list. And that's what we then go and engage in negotiating. And that creates a sense of priorities rather than going through a 218-page document looking for things throughout it. The use of mediators was extremely helpful during the last session and the previous negotiation session. We as school board members do not bargain. By contract, 2 members of the Board of Education are allowed to did this time and the previous negotiation session. And as a result, we were able to see that things broke down early and they broke down hard. And that's why that's why it's so important and incumbent upon us that we come together in a different format this next time. As Dan likes to say, adversarial bargaining leads to an adversarial contract, which leads to an adversarial culture you're building. And the best way to improve our culture is to change the way we bargain. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Dan?
Molly, I just stole my line. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, I have negotiated 5 teacher contracts on behalf of the teachers in Chardon. The first one of those contracts was negotiated under an adversarial bargaining method, and it was terrible. It took us to the brink of a strike, and the contract was ratified. However, there were still a great deal of bad feelings. And so we set about looking for a better model. And through the use of the FMCS, which is a taxpayer-funded service, it costs nothing to the district or to the local. We explored together the interest-based bargaining model. And for us in Chardon, it has changed everything. It has improved our relationship with administration immeasurably. It is my deepest hope that we can, here in Cleveland Heights, explore the same thing. Perhaps if the teachers don't want to join us in this effort this time, perhaps one of the other locals, we have 3 other locals in Cleveland Heights, University Heights, and perhaps one of them might explore it with us, and we'll see how it works. So interest-based bargaining of some sort, I think, could be a real change for the better. And then I also do want to touch on what Malia mentioned, that we now have school board members in the room as observers. I feel this is a huge change in Cleveland Heights, and this is something that has started with the 3 of us on the board. And the taxpayers deserve for their elected representatives to know what's actually happening in the negotiations that spend 75 to 80% of their tax dollars. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mario?
Linda, could you repeat the question for me, please?
Sure. Given the last set of contract negotiations with teachers, how would you change the approach for next time? And I realize you weren't involved in that, but I'm sure you have thoughts about it.
Oh yes, I had the unfortunate experience of watching my neighbors and friends potentially lose their healthcare benefits in the midst of a pandemic as a result of our strike, snow day, whatever we want to call it here. First thing I want to uplift is I support fair, honest, and equitable union negotiations. I want to advocate during negotiations for honest, clear communication to the public about how the negotiations are going with all of the district unions. I do want to support equitable contract negotiations, uplifting the fact that also our cleaners, I believe their pay steps start at $12.86 an hour. Our cafeteria workers start at $13.49 an hour. And, you know, as Democrats, we value collective bargaining, and we believe in the $15 marker as being the beginning of minimum wage for our workers. And we really need to work with all of the unions to make sure that we are understanding that the folks that have, I won't say more challenging jobs than teachers, we all have collectively challenging jobs. The people who are less paid for challenging jobs need better wages. So I'm thinking about that as well. Yes, we need to work on a non-adversarial agreement of non-adversarial collective bargaining negotiations tactic. But also we need to not ignore the fact that this past negotiation completely splintered and destroyed a lot of community trust And the ignoring that doesn't make it go away. And holding strong on, that's not going to help anybody remembering what happened in the fall. We got to move forward is completely the opposite of what this board should be doing. There needs to be truth and reconciliation about the heartbreak, about the friendships and family that was lost when people saw their neighbors, who are not just their neighbors, but the teachers and employees of this district, in dire straits in the negotiation with the Board of Education. We need to really have an honest conversation about where we were before we really figure out where we're going. And that is why I'm running for the school board. I'm not afraid to have those honest conversations. I am bringing forward Black qualified representation, not just to say that we need to move forward and do great things, but we also need to recognize where we come from and own it.
Thank you, Mario. We have a question from the chat. What will you do as a school board member to ensure that the dialogue about vouchers and school funding does not continue to divide our community and allow others in Cleveland Heights to foment anti-Semitism against Jewish residents? So Molly, do you want to start on that?
Well, first off, let me say that I sent my son to day school for a year in an attempt to improve things during his adolescence, but they didn't work. So he came back to CHUH. There's nothing wrong with families taking vouchers. What's wrong is the system of vouchers siphoning public tax money away from public education. And that is what I have said, from the beginning. And that's why I spend so much time driving down to Columbus to advocate for a different method of funding those vouchers.
Okay.
When anybody who lives in our community votes for a levy, that is money that is being voted on specifically to fund public education. So as residents and as taxpayers, we have the right to expect that those levies will go to fund our local public school system. That's why we vote for them. So the money that goes to vouchers needs to come from a different pot of money and not diminish the amount of money that is available locally for public education and statewide for public education, because everybody in Ohio who votes for a levy is voting for it for their local district. That's why we have these things on the ballot.
Thank you. Jody?
Yeah, my position is and always has been that vouchers just needed to be funded a different way. They should not have been funded through the deduct method because that made our community far more overly reliant on our local property taxes than other communities who, I feel like we have been penalized because we're a place that always did offer a lot of school choice. And that was really unfortunate. So that was one of the reasons why I was very happy to see that while the Fair School Funding Plan, isn't perfect and there's still a long way to get it fully implemented, but that was the first thing that at least was removed. It allows us as a board to be able to plan our budget. We know how much money we're getting. And once you know how much you're getting, you can work within that amount. We were having to guess every year what that amount was going to be, and it was changing all the time. So you can read my testimony, you can watch my testimony where I've said that. And that's, as Molly has said, one of the reasons why I have been to Columbus a number of times testifying in subcommittees, trying to get vouchers funded a different way, because I don't want to target on my neighbor's back. I want to make sure that we have a diverse community that lives in harmony. And that was my biggest frustration with the way vouchers were being funded, was I felt it was pitting our community against each other, which was really unfortunate. And it was pitting our community against each other in a way that no other community in Ohio was having to suffer. So that is the one big win in the Fair School Funding Plan.
Mario?
The disagreement over public funding of school choice programs and vouchers is not with the people and the communities that use the vouchers. It is with the Ohio legislature. to be clear, I am against state funds being used to pay for a non-public K-12 school tuition. And while Ohio's vouchers are utilized by many in our community, I respect their choice to attend non-public schools. And we must have honest conversations about the damage that the state's decision to expand voucher access has had on our school district. And also, I think one of the things we need to advocate for is for the state to give us our money back, because they've been taking local taxpayer money from whatever they have, given us from what they've reduced from the states to have to pay for the vouchers. That little piece that isn't covered by the state funding that we have to kick in for local funding to fund vouchers that leave our school in the past. Like, I think we need to get that money back. But we should not condone the further marginalization of the Jewish community. And it's not just about advocating in Columbus. If you're in positions of power, you have to actually say something and create systems and organizations and room for people to have these tough conversations and to call out anti-Semitism and to call out the nuance required to have these conversations. It's not just a policy fix here. Living in a diverse community is not like, it's great to say, but it is hard to live amongst people with converging and diverging interests. And wishing it away is not the solution. We have to identify it, talk about it, and then take action. Otherwise, we're going to continue perpetuating the marginalization of people.
Thank you. And Dan, you want to wrap us up on this?
Yeah, I appreciate having an opportunity to talk about this, because to me, the fact that here in the Heights, the majority of users of vouchers are, the majority of vouchers go to religious schools. While it is true, to me personally, it's irrelevant. Statewide, the majority of vouchers go to just private schools, not religious schools. And so the fact that there are folks in our community who feel that that they are being sort of singled out is really unfortunate. I will also remind us that vouchers have only existed for about 10 years. And, when I was growing up, I'm the youngest of 7. One of my sisters went to St. Anne's. It was a decision that was right for her, and my family made that decision, and we sacrificed because of it. All of these schools that take vouchers today have been here forever and ever, and they were perfectly healthy before vouchers, and they will be perfectly healthy after vouchers once the Ohio Supreme Court puts an end to it. And that, I believe, will be a great way for us to stop monetizing children and come back together the way that it used to be.
Okay, thank you. That's it for our questions. So we now have, each candidate can have 1 minute for a closing statement, and then we're going to move on with voting. So the order for the closing statements is first Mario, then Dan, then Jody, and then Malia.
Folks, I've appreciated the time that you have devoted to doing your research on the candidates that will represent our school board for the next 4 years. I am more than qualified for this position. I want to reiterate that out of my 12 years of experience in the classroom and as an administrator, and with my doctoral scholarly work in education equity, and with my work with transparency and accountability with the Cleveland Community Police Commission, my work in racial justice, I have the necessary skill sets to have the school board improve in its level of inquiry and investigation into achieving our shared values and goals. A vote for Black qualified representation also adds more representation for the students that make up 71% of our population. And I have articulated specifically today all of the resume and community rationale behind my candidacy. And on top of that, our kids will get to see a dread-headed, dark-skinned, Black queer man on the school board, and that type of representation matters, and no one can tell me otherwise. Vote Mario first before anyone else. Our students have to see more qualified Black representation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dan?
Thank you, everybody. First, for putting up with my technological challenges. As I said earlier, I introduced myself as a Heights grad, a Heights dad, a teacher, and an advocate. All of these things have shaped who I am. I've lived in this city every day of my life. I went through the schools K through 12. As I said, my wife did too, and I'm very proud of my son who received a fantastic education in our Heights schools. Serving you for the past 4 years alongside of Malia and Jody and Jim and Beverly has been a great honor of my life. We are a fantastic team. We have been facing the big challenges such as vouchers for the entire 4 years. And we have not done everything perfectly, but we have done things with a clean heart and with all of the best of intentions. I am absolutely certain that we can take this district forward. Encourage you to look up more about me at danheintz.com, and I thank you for your time.
Jody?
I want to thank the Heights Dems tonight for allowing me to talk about my candidacy. As a proven leader, I want to be reelected to the Board of Education so I can continue my work in advocacy, student achievement, and fiscal responsibility. I am the only candidate running who has a child in the district, and I'm endorsed by many leading Democrats in the Heights, including State Rep Janine Boyd, Cuyahoga County Council Rep Cheryl Stevens, University Heights Mayor Michael Dillon Brennan, Cleveland Heights City Council members Melody Joy Hart and Mike Unger, University Heights Council member John Rock, and former South Euclid City Council member Marty Gelfand. And now I ask for the Heights Dems endorsement, and you can learn more about my campaign at jody4boe.com. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Malia?
So first, I'd like to thank the Cleveland Heights Dems for holding this forum because it's incredibly important to hear from us and be able to touch and poke the Charmin, even though we're not in person. Second, I'm going to throw out my remarks and just tell you a quick story. In mid-September, I went to Atlanta to attend the Council of Urban Boards of Education Conference on Equity in Public Education. They happened to schedule that over Yom Kippur, which kind of bites, but this sort of thing happens all the time. I flew to Atlanta after taking a COVID test and went to go visit my son, who is a junior at Morehouse. And I told him that he had to find a good restaurant we could eat in before fasting for Yom Kippur. So my Black son and I went to an Indian restaurant because that's his favorite food. And then he said, why are you going to this conference? Are you going to fast? And I said, I'm going to this conference because it's important for the school district. And I'm going to fast because I always fast. And he then called me later the next day to ask how it was going. And I just want you to know that the kind of work that we do matters. It helps children and it makes everybody's lives better.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The last part of our formality here before we vote is that to provide the report of the screening committee. So before we do that, we have to limit the meeting to people who are members. So if you are not a member qualified to vote, we ask that you please remove yourself. We will be reviewing the participation list against our member list. So again, in order to be a qualified member to vote, you must be a registered Democrat who is a member and has paid dues. In the case of new members, 30 days ago, and in the case of renewing members, you could have paid your dues for renewal up to today. So we're just going to take a minute to review the participation list to be sure that we're limiting to qualified voters. So just bear with us a second while we do that. And again, if your name is in the list and it doesn't have your full name, we ask that you kindly put that in now so that we can confirm that you are a member who is entitled to vote.
Oh, yeah, that's his real name.
Somebody is not on mute.
Uh, Linda, I'm going to start removing people who have not removed themselves.
Okay. We appreciate your patience tonight with the meeting. I know it was a long meeting, but these were very important issues. And I think it's important that we let our candidates have an opportunity to talk to us about their candidacy and the issues facing our school board. And thank you for your patience.
I apologize. I'm almost done here.
It's okay. Take your time. We have to do this right.
Linda, do you want all the screens to be on? Do
I'm sorry.
you want everyone's screen to be on or no? Does it matter?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Sue, do you have questions about anybody else who's remaining?
I don't think so. Just making sure that everyone's given me their last name, that we don't have any duplicates in the room. I think it's
So I have a question for the DeGalias. Are you both on one screen? Is that what you're doing? You can unmute yourselves.
Yeah, we're on one screen. I did not copy the link for one of us, so we're on Peter's link. Is that a problem?
Well, I can only have one person vote privately per screen.
Ah,
So
okay.
we can.
If you just re-register using the same link, you should be good. We'll let you in.
Oh, okay.
I'll drop the registration link in the chat.
All right. Do you want to get your laptop? You have to do it on another computer though, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Or on your phone.
Or a phone in the app.
Oh, I can do it on the phone here. Okay.
Does she have to have the app, Elle?
Yeah.
Well,
You have
I was already on my phone earlier, so that shouldn't be a problem.
Okay. All right. We'll give you a minute to do that. Thank you all for your patience.
I'm sorry, I have a question. My son was removed from the meeting.
Is your son a member?
He is a member,
What is his name, please?
Yaakov Stein.
I have a Jason Stein and Shimona Stein.
Yes, there's also a Jakob Stein. He's a paid member.
I don't
He
have
was
a
on
Jakob.
earlier. Did he get
I don't
removed?
have a third Stein on the member list. Stein?
Yes.
Go in the other room.
Yes,
Hey,
I
Linda.
don't, yes,
He's good.
okay.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Peter, are
Okay,
you
so let me proceed with the report of the screening committee. So the screening committee conducted our interviews with the candidates and reviewed their questionnaires that they submitted. We feel that our community is lucky to have 4 candidates for school board who are such strong supporters of our public school and are strong candidates each in their own right. And it's interesting that, you know, I think that I've talked to a lot of people who find that faced with this blessing of 4 really good candidates, it's very hard to make a decision about how to vote. And that's ultimately what happened with our committee. So the majority of our committee voted not to endorse individual candidates, but we do want to reaffirm our commitment to support public education for all students and to express our appreciation to the 4 candidates who participated in our process and who are running in this campaign. So our tradition in Cleveland Heights Democrats is to have an opportunity for members to have discussion. So we ask that if you would like to make a comment, that you can raise your hand or indicate in the chat that you would like to make a comment. And we ask that you please, so that we can maximize the number of people who will have an opportunity to comment, that you please limit your comments to 30 seconds. So who would like to start? Rosa, go ahead, please. You can unmute yourself.
Hey, everybody. So I agree that we have, 4 strong supporters of public schools, but I think it's important to echo Mario's point about representation. I think when we look to leadership in this community and we look to see if it's reflective of who it serves, it's not always the case that it is. You can see it in our council, you can see it in historically in our city. So I think the fact that there could be a young Black gay man on CHUH board, especially one that's so qualified and has so many experiences in education and so much education that other members don't have, and that our students could see that reflected in their leadership on their board of education is really powerful. So I just don't want that to get lost in our personal connections and our knowledge of some of the candidates. I think it's really, really important that we have a school board that reflects the kids that are in the district.
Thank you, Rosa. Anyone else have a comment? It's quite rude tonight. Rachel?
So the big dilemma is whether whatever we do is going to make it easier for one of the anti-public school people to be elected. I mean, it's very concerning to me. I feel terrible that I wish we had just 3 candidates that we could endorse, and because now we have this other slate, and you can bet that all the anti-public school people will vote for all 3 of them. So I think I'm going to vote for the incumbents for that reason, because I think they have a better chance of getting elected and they have more name recognition. I am very grateful that Mario ran. I think he has great leadership and a lot to contribute. I know he's a pretty new member of our community, and I hope he gets more engaged and that we see him running again soon if he doesn't get elected this time. It isn't an easy decision for me to say that. But I'm very concerned that we might get one or more of the other slate elected if we aren't strategic about how we do this.
Thanks, Rachel. Anybody else want to make a comment?
Sherry said she wants to in the chat.
Okay, go ahead, Sherry. Unmute
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to say that I think it's unfortunate that the presentation about school funding was presented by a colleague of the three incumbents. And I think it would have been served the group better if that was presented by someone who was neutral. And I also want to say how excited I am to have a candidate of color who is a remarkably qualified individual. And I'm so saddened when I look at a white majority power structure for a majority minority school district. So I'm very excited about Mario Clopton-Zimler, and I'm really hoping that people will stop asking Black candidates to wait their turn.
Thank you, Sherry. Anybody else want to make a comment?
Can candidates make comments?
You can make a comment in your capacity as a member, certainly.
Sure. As a member of this Democratic club and as a new member in this society or in Cleveland Heights, as a resident, I have to say that if we keep delaying electing young Black leadership because we're afraid of what might exist out there, then you will never be able to live up to the values that you espouse. We cannot wait any longer for young, Black, queer, marginalized people to get into power because there are threats out there. There are always going to be threats to the ways of our democratic values. But we don't step into those threats with fear. I am here today having raised over $10,000 as a candidate, having knocked over 4,000 doors, because I have a message and a plan that can win, not just in this school board election, but for democratic causes for elections to come. We have to consider what could be beyond what might exist in our fears.
Thank you, Mario. Just excuse me for 1 second, Marty, then we'll get your question. Al, I sent you a question in the chat about the member list. Would you take a look at that, please? Marty, go ahead. You can unmute yourself.
Thank you, Linda. I just wanted to say that I'm impressed with all four of these candidates. I'm going to vote for 3 of them because I can only vote for 3 of them. I wish all 4 were running. But I just hope that everybody knows that if you support one versus another, that you don't undervote, because every undervote is an opportunity for one of the anti-schools candidates to get themselves elected. So vote for the 3 best out of these 4, please. I don't think it's I just think it's important that everybody vote for all 3 people that they have the opportunity to vote for, and not just vote for one.
Does anybody else want to make a comment? If you do, just unmute yourself.
Yeah, let's vote.
I apologize. We're trying to verify membership of somebody. who is not on my list, but who says that they paid their dues. And unfortunately, the information sent to me doesn't give me anybody's name, so I can't tell who sent it. So we're looking at our PayPal account to see if we can validate the payment. So please bear with us just for a minute. Anybody else have a comment they would like to make? Jen, your mom wants to make a comment?
No,
That was her payment?
I think that's the individual you were looking to see to verify.
I can't tell. Phone number is 5510743.
No, and she's not verified.
I'm sorry?
No, that's not her phone number.
Okay.
So she's not verified to vote.
Her last name is what again?
No,
I'm sorry?
no, no.
Oh, Elizabeth Jones. Let me look.
Okay.
I see her on she's on our member list, but not having paid dues. She didn't pay dues in the last couple of years.
Okay, well then I will take her off.
Okay. Thank you for your patience, everybody. This will just take a second.
Okay, she's off.
Okay, so Al, please admit Amy Smith. She is a member. We had her under a different name.
I already did.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the delay on that, Amy. Name confusion. Okay, so we're going to go on with the vote, finally. So just remember, you need a 60 majority to win. You're going to get a ballot, excuse me, with 4 names on it. You may vote for up to 3 people on your ballot. Please launch the poll.
Could someone remove me as a host so I can vote?
Are we supposed to have gotten the poll yet? I did not.
I haven't gotten it on my screen yet. It's getting launched. So I think that Al has to adjust the host designation. I can't do that. Can everybody see the poll on your screen? I see it on my screen. Al, this is showing single choice.
Yeah.
Folks, please bear with us for a minute.
I think that comment in the chat is important. Says, can we please make sure to provide clear instructions on if we need to revote for the selection from the first poll? It's a yes,
So
right?
yes, everybody should use the poll that just came on your screen, which says up to 3, multiple choice, and then it has 4 names listed. Okay, so you can vote for up to 3 people on your ballot.
Can you take me off as a host so I can vote?
Al, can you adjust so Sue is not a host so she can vote? Okay, Marty is saying he didn't see a ballot. Did anybody else not get a ballot?
Marty, are you in the corner or on your phone? Because in the corner, you're gonna have to scroll down on your phone or scroll over and it's gonna pop up.
Hey, I did not receive a ballot.
Are you on your phone, Yakov?
Yeah.
If you scroll over, so if you move the screen to the right so that the left screen can come over.
I'm trying.
And then Sue, can you rejoin? So I'm letting me remove you as a.
Okay.
Marty, did you get a ballot?
No. I didn't.
Maybe it's because they have.
Did you scroll over on your phone as Al suggested?
Yes.
Marty, are you using the app?
I'm just using my phone. I don't know. I'm on Zoom.
Okay, you have to use the app.
I got a ballot before. I just couldn't vote for more than one person, but I'm not getting it now.
Yeah. So that's the point.
Well, do you think Marty needs to go off and come back on? I hate to suggest rebooting, but
If it's any, I don't know if this is a clue or not, but I was in the chat room when the ballots came up because Sherry's here with me and she got hers. She wasn't in the chat room. I was in the chat room.
I mean, no, that did you minimize the chat?
Well,
Yes, we did.
yeah,
Yes.
I'm done with the chat now. I mean, when I saw that my wife had her ballot, I was trying to figure out how to get mine and I got out of the chat room.
If you hit more, the top option above chat should be.
Sue, are you good?
Okay, got it. Okay, I voted.
Once we've submitted our vote, can we leave the meeting?
Before you, we may have to go to a recount. So just around 2.
we may go to a second ballot if we don't get 3 endorsements off the first ballot. So if you'd like
Actually,
to
we're
stay
good.
on.
We have 96% voted. We're still waiting for 2 people. We'll give it a few more minutes.
Did Yakov find his ballot?
Yes, he did. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And Marty, you got your ballot?
Yep, I voted.
Okay. You still waiting on people, Al?
We have 52 out of 54. That should be good.
Okay, we're gonna do a countdown from 5. If you still need a second to think. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're gonna close that vote.
Linda, you want me to just go ahead and share the results now, or you want to wait until?
You can share the results.
Looks like, can everyone see?
So everybody got over 60%. Or everybody got 60% or more. Am I reading that correctly?
That's correct.
I guess I'm surprised that could happen, but I don't know the math well enough to know if that works or if there is some glitch. Anybody have a thought on that?
If you only voted for one candidate, it could work.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay, well, congratulations. We have 4 endorsed candidates. Thank you all very much for attending tonight. I appreciate your patience. Thank you for the candidates. And we'll look forward to seeing you folks Wednesday night for our next fun-filled meeting. Hope you have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
everyone.